Colorado Springs is the 39th largest city in the country, and it will soon see at least 4 new faces on its city council this spring. News 5 is teaming up with the Gazette to make sure you get to know the people looking to represent your neighborhood. Today, we hear from the candidates in City Council District 5, which includes neighborhoods in the central part of the city, north of downtown and east of I-25, including places you like to play, like Palmer Park and Patty Jewett Golf Course. 4 candidates are looking to represent you. We'll answer your questions in this special edition of News 5 at noon. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for this special edition of News 5. I'm Allison Zimmerman. We've partnered with the Gazette to help get you informed for the Colorado Springs City Council election. That's on April 1st. We are hosting 6 forums for each of the City Council districts. Today, we have District 5. There are 4 candidates in this election, and all 4 of them have graciously joined us for this forum today. Councilwoman Nancy Henjem, Cass Moline, Chris Burns, and Jim Miller. And we do want to go over our forum rules for the candidates today. They have not been provided questions ahead of time. They will each have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Most of the questions we're asking today have a 1-minute response time, and most questions will also be directed at all candidates. Others will be directed at just one. The order the candidates are listed on the ballot is the order of who answers the first question. And candidates, you'll be able to see how much time you have by this timer right here, which you were briefed on ahead of going live today. We have a full hour for this forum as we have 4 candidates, so let's go ahead and get started. Councilwoman Henjem, we'll begin with you. How we manage growth and what responsible growth looks like is a big topic of discussion in the city right now. With District 5 being in central Colorado Springs, what do you see as the biggest concern for growth for the neighborhoods in your district? You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Allison. And first of all, I just want to say that I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful for KOAA and the Gazette Telegraph for hosting this forum. And I'm grateful to live in Colorado Springs. Growth is probably the #1 topic for everyone in the city, and all challenges relate to growth. So I think the approach to growth and the concern about growth, the thing that is on people's minds the most is water. And so we need to be developing and growing our city in a responsible way, in a balanced way, that really addresses those kinds of resources. It's the most precious resource that we have. So I have actually voted against what are called flagpole annexations, Carmen Line and Amara, because I don't think that's a good way for us to grow in terms of water uses, water resources, as well as the level of service inside the city, be it public safety or parks or roads. Those are the things that I'm hearing about from my constituents.
Mr. Moline, same question to you.
Thank you. For responsible growth, what I've been hearing about as a concern is developers coming in and throwing in giant apartment complexes or large units into our local neighborhoods. And so I would be more concerned about finding the proper forms and working with our constituents in our communities to develop regulations that fit their characteristics of their neighborhood that they choose to grow and develop into. I'm glad you brought up the annexations. As far as the annexations, I support them. We have a water buffer limit of 128% for the new annexations, which allows the city to grow and develop in a way that is responsible and it is thinking about our future. Thank you.
Mr. Burns.
First up, yes, thank you for the forum. And for starters, we are a growing city. That's not going to stop. The growth that we have has to be managed, and City Council has a key part to play in that oversight. The developers that come in, whether they be building multi-unit complexes, individual units, or corporate areas, they have to present a plan to council that deals with everything that's been stated here, things like water, public safety, if it applies urban wildfire interface. Everything that's involved in that plan has to be thorough and down to the data that actually shows that it's a functional plan. When it comes to annexations, whether they be a flagpole annexation or a larger annexation, keeping in mind that the utilities then are mandated to provide power and resources to that annexation, there has to be a management of that takes into account the additional costs to the people that will live in that annexation. So in the end, all of that development has to be closely balanced with the data that the plan shows.
Mr. Miller.
Thanks KOAA, thanks Gazette, thanks everybody for listening and watching. So growth management. Growth management is extremely important. We don't want to lose the identity of Colorado Springs being Colorado Springs. It has slowly but surely become what? It's starting to turn into everywhere else. That's not what Colorado Springs is about. Yes, they mention annexations and so forth. Yes, be responsible, be smart. If the communities want to be annexed, they'll tell us no if they want to be annexed. There's a reason they're enclaves still in town. That's something to really think about. Water management, responsibility, all this good development needs to be properly and adequately done and really looking at it. Remember, with growth, they keep telling us we need more and more taxes. Taxes is a self-sustaining system, which means what? There are more people here, so there are more people paying taxes. Taxes do not need to go up. Be smart, be responsible, and do what we need to do the way it needs to be. Remember, this is a city council position. That's also a utility board's position. That has to do with the legislation. It also has to do with all the land use. All right? Thank you.
And perfect transition, we're going to talk about utility costs right now. Mr. Moline, we'll begin with you for this question. Utility costs have gone up in Colorado Springs in part because of state regulations, but also to accommodate for growth. Discussions have come up to introduce other forms of alternative energy, such as nuclear. Some of you have detailed your support for this. Is this an option Colorado Springs need to consider? Why or why not?
I'm glad you asked this question. In my research, I've been finding that a lot of the issues that we have at the local level are actually stemming from what's going on at the state level. And as far as nuclear goes, I would be for it. Growing up, we hear about the horrors of like Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island or Fukushima. But the technology for nuclear energy has developed so much in the past 10 years that it's become a more reliable and plausible technology to utilize growing into the future. Now, the biggest cost and the biggest concern with it is going to be implementing and building it and putting it in place. There's a large cost that goes into building some of these structures, but the technology is there, and it's a viable and clean renewable energy source that we should be looking forward at for our situation.
Mr. Burns.
Sure. So as a city council person, we will also be the board of directors of the utilities. And that's a big thing to learn. As we study that, we realize that we're in a pretty unique situation here in Colorado Springs. We don't have any major water sources. We're isolated, and we import a lot of our power. Having said that, we have to work with utilities to keep those power rates low as possible. We're really up against a real challenging time, though, in that our demand for energy is increasing. As we add electric vehicles, it increases the power grid. As we add AI systems and larger computing systems, that demand for power is going to continue to go up. But to the individual citizen that wants to heat their home and run their lights, that is something as a city council person and as a council as a whole that we have to look at and take steps to keep the least amount of increase as possible.
And Mr. Miller.
I have zero problems with anything that could be viable, usable, reliable, and affordable for any of us. Okay, we live in an era in the Springs right now where we have a lot of choices, all of us that are overworked and overtaxed. The decisions are what? Heat or eat. That turns out being with a lot of the things transpiring with this. So yes, let's look at it, let's see, but it should never ever cost us an arm, a leg, and everything you've earned to turn on a light or to flush the toilet or wash your hands. This has gotten out of hand and ridiculous. We don't have anybody in the utility board really standing up to any of the state legislation or laws going, look, great, good idea, renewable stuff. But you know what? You don't charge our citizens and have them overworking to where they can't even turn a light on. It's just unbearably overpriced, excuse me. We look at all this stuff. It's just way, way too much. Utilities has so many access fees that it's $100 or $200 every month before we even turn a freaking light on. It's insane, it's ridiculous. Let's look at some renewable stuff that's affordable, and let's keep the things we have into transition before we switch over to something that's not affordable or reliable.
Councilwoman Hedgem.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, having served for the last 4 years on the Utilities Board, I've learned a tremendous amount about our utilities. And energy generation is probably next to water, one of our most biggest challenges right now. We actually don't have the generation we need to fully address the business needs and new businesses that want to come to Colorado Springs. So we are really having to balance the reality of the legislation and addressing renewables to help with the climate. At the same time, We have natural gas generation that's really essential. We did just pass a 5-year rate case, which is kind of unheard of in the utility industry. And the reason we did that is so that we can continue to provide reliable and affordable energy and all 4 services for our city. And we did have our UPAC, the Utilities Policy Advisory Commission, recently present to us on nuclear, and we are very much looking at nuclear, micronuclear for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When it comes to public safety, a survey conducted by the city showed residents in Colorado Springs want more done to reduce crime. If elected to city council, what would you propose the city implements to address this? Mr. Burns, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, so I am a retired Colorado Springs police officer with 24 years of service, so this is near and dear to me, and one of the things that really prompted me to move forward and run for city council. We first off do not have a full roster of officers on the department. We are short officers, and the department and the city struggles to bring those officers to Colorado Springs. So the first thing to do is to address that, to partner with the department to provide whatever resourcing is necessary to bring those officers up to full strength. The other thing about that is that we're dealing with some legislative efforts from the state level that have reduced criminal penalties, and that has really placed a burden on officers and placed a harm to our citizens. So one, to lobby against that, but also partner with the officers that are here, both in training and in responding to all those calls. And we can get into also the difficulty in staffing the dispatch center fully also. So there are some real challenges around there, but I'm ready to address them.
Mr. Miller, same question to you.
Okay, so there's a lot of spokes to this wheel right here. I think there's a number of things that we can do. Let's get rid of the red light cameras, let's get rid of the speed traps, take that money, put it towards the law enforcement portion of it. Let's take downtown and everywhere where there's parking meter maids, and let's get rid of the meter maids, have those actually be beat cops patrolling and walking around town, and they can double facet it. They can keep the crime from being on the sidewalks. If I'm paying for parking somewhere, I don't want to deal with a bunch of crime. None of us do. They can watch that, walk through the parks, check the parking meters, do some of that stuff. The city as well needs to stand behind citizens that do the right thing. Good people doing the right thing, stopping a thief, stopping somebody from getting hurt or anything else. I'm not saying we need to pay their medical bills, but people don't need to be scared that the city's going to try to put charges on them for stopping somebody doing something that is unacceptable in our community. Allowing the community to also police itself and keep things proper and straight when there is a crime being committed, so the citizens don't have fear of actually doing the right thing, is a big, big step in it. So that's pretty much all I got.
Councilwoman Henschel.
Thank you. I'm really very proud to say that after 4 years of building trusted relationships with both police and fire, I have received endorsements from the Police Protective Association and from the Colorado Springs Firefighters Local 5. I'm very proud of those relationships, and they know that I've been working hard to support them in the work that they do. One of the things that I think we really need to be thinking about in terms of public safety is our emergency response. Last year we tried to bring emergency response and medical response into the fire department, and I think we really need to look at that again. Because I think we need to decide, do we want the profits from that business to go to a private business, or do we want those dollars to be reinvested into the city and into the citizens of Colorado Springs with our nationally awarded homeless outreach program through the fire department that has done an incredible job of reaching out to homeless and also addressing alternative medical response that's been very helpful. I think our citizens deserve that.
And I'm going to ask you this, and I'm going to ask for only a yes or no response on this. If a question were to go to the ballot on putting emergency services under CSFD, how would you vote?
I would vote yes.
Mr. Moline.
Thank you. When it comes to a city, there's really 3 levels to build it up. It's public safety is a foundation. It comes to our merchants and business, and then it's our education and further development. Now, without public safety, a lot of the foundation really is put at risk. A lot of the other stuff's put at risk. So I think the issue really comes down to restructuring a lot of what we already have in place to better address the needs of the public, and then properly funding the police department. I think that if we also implement things like body cameras, which have like auto record triggers, things like when they're dispatched, holsters taken out, or using their sirens, I think that would also go to help with not just public safety, but the safety of the police officers as well. And I think that would help address some of the staffing issues that we've been seeing. Thank you.
And this next question is going to come from a viewer. We will play this in this monitor here. If there's any sound issues, I'll repeat the question.
I currently live in downtown Colorado Springs, and I'm wondering what are the plans for evacuating large numbers of people as well as preserving our beautiful views concerning all the new large multifamily units that are being built.
Mr. Miller, we'll begin with you for this question.
I honestly don't know what the plan is right now because I think they've been stacking too many things too tight and too condensed in a lot of places before they even implement a plan, and they need to be a lot smarter with making a plan. We need to have fire department. We need to have all the law enforcement stuff. We need it to be able to be accessible, feasible, and in a prompt amount of time. We also need to take with some of this to remember that there's not a lot of good 911 operators. How many of us have called the 911 and it goes, here, you're on hold, go online, do that, and all this and that. And if you do talk to a law enforcement officer, what do they do nowadays too? What happens to it? It tells you, oh, you better call or you better get online. So this stuff all needs to be updated, it needs to be measured and looked at. I'm not the expert on it. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I am the expert on it, but it's something that has to be very vigorously, adequately, and quite detailed looked at and made sure that it's cost effective to do it the right way and the proper way.
Councilwoman Hengen.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot in that question. So to start with Wildfire, I would go to the city's website and make sure that you are signed up for notifications. Wildfire Ready is available on the website. I would also speak to the fire mitigation that's being done after we pass that retention for $20 million to spend on wildfire mitigation. So there's a lot that's being done, and the city actually right now is working on evacuation planning as well. To move to the building heights, which is a very different question, I think it's super important that we have full community engagement, and I'm glad this question got asked because tomorrow is the deadline for citizens to go to the Downtown Partnerships website and fill out the questionnaire for the Experience Downtown Master Plan and get your voice for what you think about building heights and everything else related to an experience of downtown that you want.
Mr. Moline.
Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with our evacuation plan. In my research, I think that the city's overdue for a new evaluation of our evacuation plans. But we live in a time where we have technology and at our fingertips all of human knowledge. And utilizing AI, I think, is a way that we can simulate and find the best plans for our evacuation routes for our citizens. So as we continue to grow, I think it's important that we continue to utilize some of these growing technologies to make these evacuation plans and these routes a little bit better and a little bit cleaner for all of our citizens' safety. Thank you.
Since we just have a few seconds left, I just want you to explain to me what would be the difference in your mind between relying on the resources we have from CSFD of coming up with these evacuation plans versus AI?
Sure. So utilizing their expertise, I would have them also utilize and simulate some of the behaviors of the humans from the AI perspective. So it'd be more of a partnership with that than to rely over them.
Mr. Burns.
So I retired from the Colorado National Guard in addition to being a police officer, and I was actually a disaster exercise planner, so this is something I have some level of experience with. So first off, when it comes to development, whether it be infill in a city or whether it be interface into the wildfire interface areas, it starts with the plan, and anyone that's going to develop in that area has to show that plan and not just say we're going to hope for the best. They have to actually show the population concentration of a given area and the traffic flows and a reasonable evacuation timeline, and that would be whether it's in the city or there in the wildfire interface. I'd also point out that there's a partnership that you can have with the Colorado Springs Fire Department with their mitigation program where they come in and remove biomass with partnerships with individual property owners, which is a great program that again reduces that risk of that disaster happening.
Thank you. We'll move on to this next question, which comes from a viewer on social media. And Mr. Moline, we'll begin with you for this question. How would you evaluate the progress the city has made on homelessness in the community? And what do you envision as a strategy for the future? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm a full-time college student, and one of the classes I took was actually developing policy. And the policy that I developed was focusing on the homeless response. And so this is a topic near and dear to my heart. I think that there's a lot of options that we have. And if we could look at what other states and other towns have done to address their homeless populations and their situations, it's really come down to pairing housing first initiatives with safe camping spaces and providing mental health efforts and education for their work training. And towns have found that when you couple those things together, they've greatly reduced crime, repeat homelessness, and in some instances have even solved it completely. Thank you.
So over the last 30 years, whether it was my volunteer positions or as a police officer, I've interfaced with the homeless on a regular basis, and it is a really challenging problem. So for starters, we need to partner with all our community service providers, whether they be funded by the city, private entities, or faith-based organizations, to ensure that we have adequate space and adequate resourcing for people that are struggling with either mental health or drug addiction. The other part of that, though, is that because a person's experiencing homelessness, it doesn't give them a right to have a negative impact on citizens, say, in our downtown area. I am in favor of the sit-lie ordinances. It's not saying a person can't be somewhere, but it does say you can't do certain behaviors in certain areas. So I am in favor of that. But at the end of the day, it is an impact that is spreading in our community, it is growing, and there is challenges to address.
And Mr. Miller.
The homelessness. We all deal with this every day, all the time. Personally, I'm probably one of the few that'll say, you don't try to cost us all up. You don't try to make the rest of us that are working every day homeless for the homeless. That doesn't make any sense to me. These nonprofits, these charities, every feasible thing that is being used, we need to start double checking to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. Make sure they're actually not just, oh, they came here overnight, they slept, they kicked them out at 6 a.m. and now it's the rest of our problem again. Where they're getting hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars and not actually fulfilling anything with just completing it. They just turn them back loose into the community. It's a little bit arduous and irritating. We can't make everything a mental facility, but there's drug use, there's people that don't want to be homeless, there's some people that chose this as a career. We need to start looking at it and going, look, all right, you're homeless, is your family here, who are you? Call your family, see what's going on from there. These nonprofits, these charities need to be double checked to make sure that they're doing what they need to be doing and not just continuously feeding the problem.
Councilwoman Hensham.
Yeah, thank you. So as a city, I think we're actually doing better than most, and we have in fact reduced our numbers, but we can always do better. And so there are 3 strategies that I would highlight. Outreach, shelter, and prevention. In terms of outreach, again, I mentioned it before, our homeless outreach program with the fire department won national awards for their work. They go out into the streets and they build relationships with people on the street to connect them with the services that they need to help get them off the street. That's a lot of work, and it's actually very successful. In terms of sheltering, we do have shelters, but we need to do more than sheltering. We need to shelter and help get people connected to employment and housing and supportive services. And finally, I want to end with prevention, and a very great story about, in our bike ride, our bike share, we have a story of, there's a $35 a month lease that you can get with those bikes, and somebody shared a story that bike, that ability to use that bike helped them to get to their job on time and to be able to keep a house over their head and not become homeless. We need to do more of that.
All right, the future of many federal grants and other federal funding sources are up in the air right now as cuts are being made nationally. It's likely the need for cuts will make it down to the local level. What would be your top 3 priorities in the budget process if you're elected to council? Mr. Burns, we'll begin with you.
So a lot in that question. One, we don't know what the effects of the cuts at the national level are going to be and how they're going to impact us here. As far as what we're addressing here in Colorado Springs, the first thing I think that we have to address is public safety. We have increased response times, we have strugglings to fulfill officer positions, so that would be one thing that I think we first need to address. The cost of housing is the other one, and the way we address that is by increasing the supply through reasonable development and planned expansion. And the third thing is the energy costs. I think we need to partner and work with our utilities, especially in light of what could be federal mandates or state level mandates that are going to really affect our ability to provide adequate power throughout the city.
And just because we have a little bit more time, 3 specific priorities, though, in the budget that you would want to see funded at the highest level.
Public safety would be one. That would be my highest priority. I would say also disaster mitigation and affordable housing.
Mr. Miller.
Infrastructure, roads, 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 roads. We're tired of the potholes. Heck, they spent all the money on sidewalks. Sidewalks are falling apart. It's ridiculous already with the new sidewalks. I'm not walking to work. I'm having to drive to work all day. Obviously, yes, the disaster mitigation type things come up. We don't want another Waldo Canyon fire. We don't want any of that kind of stuff around here. We just saw what happened, making sure everything's done. We need to make sure that the utilities is budgeted properly and not just going to cost all of us an arm and a leg. There are a lot of things that they are not spending money properly on, but yes, the infrastructure would be the utmost priority. We need to keep the law enforcement funded properly and adequately. That also includes the fire department as well.
And do you have examples of where money is not being spent on correctly?
The roads, for instance, they spend it on sidewalks instead of the roads. That's a very prime example. We all saw that around town. We got potholed roads, but nice looking sidewalks. Law enforcement, we got red light cameras and speed traps coming in. It was a waste of freaking money.
Councilwoman Henshaw.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I agree. I mean, the funding our public safety, police, and fire is paramount. I want to actually talk about something we need to do to bring some more revenue into our budget that will help address some of the budget shortfalls, in particular related to parks. We have been exploring, and I think we need to go to the voters to increase our lodging, auto, and rental tax. That is a tax that is paid almost exclusively by visitors to our community. Right now, that tax at 1% and 2% is out of 150 of the cities our size, we are number 144. We have a Garden of the Gods that gets more visitors than many of our national parks, and our parks is desperate for more funds. We need to find a way to offset that fund, and one of the reasons people come here is for our beautiful outdoors. So I want to see us increase that money so that we can take care of our parks as well.
Mr. Moline.
So I think that the foundation of a city is public safety. So that would be my number one, to ensure that we have adequate funding there. Number 2 would be our infrastructure. We've got a crumbling infrastructure. I mean, it's no secret. You drive east and west on Palmer Park, and you want to stay on the inside lane because the outside lane is just full of potholes. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, District 5 specifically is one of the main corridors for traveling east and west. And so I think making sure that we have adequate funds there to support our infrastructure, things like dedicated bike lanes, expanding our bus routes to help the flow of traffic on those roads, I think would be important. And the last thing I would like to address would be the homeless population. Yes, it's true we have a decrease of homeless individuals, but we have an increase of homeless families, and so I think that it's imperative that we take care of those families first. Thank you.
Thank you. City Council recently passed an ordinance allowing e-bike use on trails in Colorado Springs, but legal action may delay it from being implemented. There's an argument that this should be left up to voters. There's also an effort underway to get a question on the ballot to de-annex a recent annexation passed by City Council. Mr. Miller, will begin with you for this question. Do you support either one of these efforts for ballot initiatives? And what do you think is the difference between a decision that should be left up to City Council and one that should go to the voters?
So, the e-bike thing, I think it should go up to the voters. They use the trails, they're walking around, they're using them, they're there every day. And it should be, just everybody. If you do the e-bike thing or if you don't or walk, that's up to them. The annexation thing. So, with the annexation situation, if someone doesn't want to be a part of the city, we need to ask why don't they want to be part of the city? It's a very big question. Why wouldn't they want to be part of the city? Why do they want to be de-annexed back out and become back into an enclave? Why? What is the reason for that? But that is also their decision to be made and had. I do think with a lot of the city council part, I think they get a little a little too greedy with authority and power, and they forgot about the everyday people with everything going on, the day-to-day stuff. A lot of us are toiling the soil, working all day. We need to have a lot more decision-making thing, and they don't ever want to talk to us or do anything with us unless we're a committee, a group, or some kind of person that either donated or has some kind of relationship with them.
All right, and Councilwoman Henjum, I will actually give you some additional time at the end if you'd like to respond directly to Mr. Miller's comments about City Council.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
It's my turn.
But we'll go on to you for the question about ballot initiatives and City
Okay.
Council.
It's all
Thank
right
you.
to pay attention.
It's all right. So, I just voted recently on the e-bike policy, and that was something that came to City Council. That was a very, very challenging, and I think it became very evident if you watched the meeting how I struggled with City Council making that decision around the definition of a non-motorized vehicle. And the reason it was an important thing about whether or not we take it to the ballot is strictly because of the language in the Trails and Open Space, the TOPS tax. And so that is I think the legal action that you're referring to. I disappointed a lot of folks with that, and I think the voters should be able to have a chance to decide on that if they so choose. But I also believe that City Council had the right to make that definition change.
And what is the threshold of decisions that should be left up to council versus sending things to the ballot?
Well, we are representative body responsible for land use decisions. And in the case of the annexation, there were enough citizens who decided that they didn't like that decision, and they have an option to do a referendum. So I think it was an appropriate decision for council to make, and the citizens have made another choice. So we'll see how that goes.
And Mr. Moline.
I think it's important to remember, as a city councilman, a member, it is your responsibility to be a channel for the voice of the people. It is important to listen to what they say and give them an opportunity to respond and talk about things that affect them. So those issues should definitely go to the people. For the e-bike initiative, I think that was inclusive to include a lot more people out into an open space, which I think is important for health and safety to be out and about. As far as the annexation goes, a growing city has many tools that it has in order to responsibly grow. And so an annexation, something like that, we got to be careful not to prevent and inhibit a city from being able to do its job, which is manage that use and grow responsibly. So we got to be able to find that balance.
Mr. Burns.
Yeah, so for starters, the e-bike was a contentious issue. Personally, I think that the trails should be reserved for personal pedal power bikes, separate from either an electric assist or a battery-driven electric cycle. I would see that as something that would increase the wear and tear on our delicate trail systems. But having said that, if the voters or the council chose a different direction, as a council person, I would absolutely adhere to the decision of the citizens. Now, back to your question about whichever thing that we decide on in council, how do we discern through whether or not it goes to a vote? Well, the citizens make that decision for us. If there's an issue that the citizens either disagree with or feel strongly enough, as we can either look at a referendum or a ballot initiative where they can sign a petition to put that question on the ballot, which is part of that democratic process. And then as city council people, we're bound to follow those citizen desires.
This next question will be directed at Councilwoman Henjum, and you did bring this up briefly, but want to dig a little further into this. You were one of 2 council members to vote against the recent Carmen Line annexation. One of the reasons you cited was that it wasn't the right timing. When is the right timing, and what needs to be the top considerations? I know you mentioned water, but what realistically does that look like when City Council is approving these annexations?
Well, the right timing, I think, it's a matter, I suppose, of philosophy in terms of how far out you go from city limits to put such a significant development. The concern that I had was you are building and putting infrastructure out across county land and creating an enclave and creating levels of service challenges inside the current city limits. So logical extensions are very appropriate. Actually, I think the only 2 annexations I've never voted for are those 2 flagpole annexations for the reason that I just mentioned. And when you talk to our staff at the city, the people who work in fire and police and public works and parks, when you talk to those employees off the record, They all think that those are very bad ideas because we are having difficulty meeting the level of service we need now within the city limits.
Mr. Moline, as a veteran, do you feel the city has enough services supporting our active duty and veteran community? And if not, what should the city be considering?
Sure. So for the city supporting veterans, I've been hearing a lot of other disabled veterans having issues meeting their appointments and getting to different medical appointments because we have so many of our services being spread out across the whole city. What I would really like to see is, in terms of that, would be maybe a medical district put in a zoning area so that we have a centralized point that we can go to hit all of our appointments for our disabled veterans. Otherwise, I think that the city is doing pretty good at maintaining our veteran services.
Mr. Burns, you currently serve on the Law Enforcement Transparency and Advisory Commission, or LETAC. What is one thing you feel the commission has accomplished when it comes to addressing the public safety concerns?
So one of the things that we're very strong proponents for is increased training, and in specific, increased regular training, specifically for those line officers. One of the challenges, obviously, the police department is very overstretched and it's very difficult to find time to get adequate training. If you picture an officer that comes through an academy, then they graduate, they go onto the street in a training capacity and then become an officer. But they may not see some of those same subjects again for up to a year, depending on regular training schedules. What we're really advocating for is more and regular training for police officers. And that includes everything from use of force to constitutional appropriateness of actions to emergency responses. One of the challenges with new police officers is gaining that experience balanced with that education and training.
Mr. Miller, you mentioned sex offender residency restrictions on your campaign website. As you may know, Colorado state law does not restrict where a sex offender can reside. Some local jurisdictions in Colorado do. Of those, we did not find any that explicitly mentioned banning sex offenders from living near churches, which you do mention. Recent studies show church attendance skews older. Why do you believe sex offenders should not be able to live near churches?
Because small children congregate near churches for Sunday school and other local programs that are through different religions. They do have some programs. There's one that many people may be familiar with. It's called Pathfinders. It's kind of a Cub Scouty, Girl Scouty style kind of thing, so people kind of know what it is. But a lot of small children congregate near churches for Sunday school and many other things. And it's supposed to be a place where families can go and think that their children are safe during things without somebody trying to be a predator around it, and your kids should be able to play around the church without even being worried or concerned there. If we're going to worry about how far weed is away from schools, parks, daycares, and churches, how come we're not worried about some of the stuff that we can really mitigate and we're aware of to keep away, to keep it actually safer and give some kind of buffer zone with these types of things?
Thank you. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, have become a big topic to addressing a housing shortage in the city and across the state. As Bob Levy, a columnist with our partners at the Gazette, pointed out, concern remains as to how these ADUs could impact fire safety. City is working on its own ordinance with ADUs, but where do you think ADUs belong in Colorado Springs, and how can it impact housing supply? Councilwoman Henjum, we'll begin with you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're actually voting on this on March 11th, so it's coming up, and I've given this a lot of thought. I'm listening to people who are very supportive and want ADUs and the ability to build an ADU on their lot so that they can have their mother-in-law come and live in there with them and near them. I'm also listening to and hearing concerns from neighbors who are very concerned about the impact this will have on the character of their neighborhoods. So what I'm really pleased to say is that some local advocacy groups have been meeting on a very regular basis with our planning department to take the original ordinance and make it such that it addresses the concerns, be it about height or setbacks or size of lot, so on and so forth. So those things are being addressed, I believe, to agree that is actually really very helpful. And I think we just need common sense limits to make them happen. And the other thing that's very critical is that they not be used as short-term rental units. That's not okay. It needs to be by the owner in the way that the owner wants to use it.
Mr. Moline.
So Colorado Springs is experiencing a housing shortage of about 27,000 units. And that can be met by allowing property owners to express their property rights to put in a new ADU. The real trick is going to be balancing that to maintain the characteristics of the neighborhoods. It's really going to take community involvement to decide and come up with these form-based zonings that allow them to decide and determine what kind of ADUs they would like to allow into their neighborhoods. And I agree, they should be focused on use and not short-term rentals for our city. Thank you.
Mr. Burns.
So as the father of adult children, this is near and dear to me as I've considered that for my house. Yeah, I believe that we should be able to have an accessory dwelling unit on a residential property, provided it's properly zoned and meets all easement restrictions. I'm not in favor of multiple accessory dwelling units. Effectively, what you're doing is then you're taking a residential area and turning it into a commercial enterprise. Also with that, I'm in agreement that it should not be a short-term rental, a daily rental. That again becomes a commercial enterprise. As we look across the city, different residences face different challenges. As you move west into the urban area interface, it is a challenge at times to be able to show that you can maintain proper evacuation and fire mitigation. And that can be a restriction, potentially. But if those aspects can be met, then yes, I'm in favor of a single accessory dwelling unit.
And Mr. Miller.
Accessory dwelling units. It's your property. Do as you see fit. Private property rights is a big, big, big concern with me. Now, there are a lot of people struggling out there. We refer back to when I said it has become nothing more than a city where a lot of people that are working and living every day and sacrificed a lot to have their house, their home. They have children, they have family members that are losing their house or their property or their living circumstance. My sister-in-law is a very prime example for me, so this actually does mean quite a bit to me. Her house went into foreclosure. I had to work harder and buy it because it's so expensive out here. If you want to have an accessory dwelling and you want to rent it out, that's your own business and your own thing to deal with due to the fact you might have to mitigate some income because we're only, 3% cheaper than California? Everything's starting to close out here and it's starting to get hard to find a job or have an income. The only thing staying open in town are Walmarts and potholes.
Mr. Moline, with President Trump ending diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, if elected, would you vote to recognize events like Women's History Month, Black History Month, and Veterans Day on City Council? You have 1 minute.
I think that it's important to recognize the culture that you have experienced, and to have that be part of our city and part of our heritage, I think would be important. I don't think that we should be mandating people who are unqualified to be put into positions that could put other people at risk. But that being said, I think recognizing the value that women bring to the workforce, the value that Black Americans have brought to our communities, and veterans, I think that's important to continue. Thank you.
Mr. Burns, same question to you.
Yeah, so should the City Council recognize individual days by ethnic group? I don't think there's an issue with that. Where I would begin to draw the line is that if you're going to use public funds for a given function specific to a specific ethnic group or religion or anything that's identified in a protected category, I would draw the line at that. Those people absolutely have the freedom to assemble as they wish. There's no problem with that. We are facing a shift in national perspective regarding this, and it's a challenge. And there are some people that are significantly negatively impacted, and I acknowledge that. At the same time, I think we need to strive for an equality-based, merit-based system where anybody in any given setting can achieve anything they want based on their own efforts.
Mr. Miller.
Can you refresh the whole question for me, please?
Yeah, with President Trump ending DEI policies, if elected, would you vote to recognize events like Women's History Month, Black History Month, and Veterans Day, etc., on City Council?
This is nonsensical. My family looks like a bag of Skittles had sex with a bag of M&Ms. We have everybody and anybody in our family, and we celebrate everybody's diversity in my family. What we really should be concerned about is if you're a good or a bad person. You want to celebrate a holiday and recognize your heritage, your lineage, your creed, your religion, your ethnic group, or anything going on. In my family, I know we encourage all that, and we learn a bit from everybody, and it makes us all stronger and smarter and much more viable to each other. And we're a very strong family because of it.
And Councilwoman Henjo.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's something that as city council members, we have the opportunity to lift up our community in a very ceremonial way. And having now done dozens and dozens of these for a variety of groups, it's really uplifting to bring people in, and they're proud, and they get to speak, and they get to share who they are, and they get to be acknowledged and recognized by their city council. It's something I really enjoy quite a lot, and of course I will absolutely continue to support whatever the group is. And we often do it for veterans and for for folks who fought in wars, and so absolutely, we just did one for Women's Month for women, and it was really great. So absolutely, I would be happy to continue to do that. It's a fun part of the job.
Mr. Burns, I think you alluded to this slightly in this last answer, but this past year, the Lodgers and Automobile Renter Tax funding was cut for several community events, many of which happened in downtown Colorado Springs, some to name Festival of Lights Parade and Western Street Breakfast. Discussions came up to increase that tax, which Councilwoman Henjum, you mentioned. Do you support an effort to increase it? Why or why not? And if yes, what events do you want to see prioritized?
Yeah, so I do support increasing that tax to fund those events. A community is not a community if you're not in relationship with your neighbors. These are community building events which strengthen the relationships among individuals and among neighborhoods, and I think they're vital to our community, so yes, I support them. And you mentioned a second part of that question. I want to make sure I get that.
Which events would you like to see prioritized?
Oh, I like the Western Street Breakfast, the Bike to Work things, all of the things that bring communities together. Absolutely.
Mr. Miller.
I don't want to see any more taxes go up. It costs us enough as it is. I would probably like to see a little more fundraising, or people that want to do these things to also do some bake sales or some stuff. It's fine. Let's do that. As far as like prioritizing it, let's just put a standardized amount that's budgeted for all of it. But we can mitigate some of that by also making some of the things that the city owns available to everybody, whatever it may or may not be, whether it's a bus or free parking for the day or anything along them lines, which will help keep everybody, depending on the event, of course, just going and keeping it running and going, and make it a more of affordable type of event. We don't need to tax citizens. We can all come together and congregate as neighbors. We don't have to be friends to be neighbors. We can do our own events for the most part, especially if they get rid of any permitting costs or anything and make it much more affordable, please.
And Councilwoman Henjum, I'll ask you this, because you mentioned that you do support increasing that tax. Specifically with parks, explain how that would work when this money is typically earmarked for events.
Yeah, well, we're actually in the process right now on the LART committee and a small working group working on how would we shift how those dollars are allocated. Right now, actually, the vast majority of those dollars go to contracted entities, with Visit Colorado Springs being one of them. You know, the tax is really intended to serve the tourism industry. And so the idea is for us to prioritize how do we use those dollars in a way that helps us to be strategic, both about how to serve that very important industry in our city, while at the same time making sure that the citizens who at times are burdened by the fact that tourists are here, that we allocate those dollars in a way that serve the citizens as well. So it would be, we haven't decided yet, but it would be in a future increase, some of those monies would go to support our outdoors and our outdoor recreation industry. Yeah.
Mr. Moline.
I would not be for increasing the tax of any resident here. I want to make that very clear. I think that there are things that we need to make sure that we're hitting first. We need to make sure we're hitting public safety. We need to make sure that we're attracting the right businesses and getting infrastructure put in place. And then we can start focusing on our cultural development and our festivities and festivals and stuff. Now that being said, I do think that it's very important that we have community events and community building events. So I would look to reorganize how we have our funds right now allocated to best serve the community in those developments, and doing some of those ideas like free parking or allowing the citizens to use some of the city's equipment for events and things like that to further help those community building things.
All right, and we are already at closing statements. Can you believe it? Already that time. I told you it'd fly by, didn't I? All right, and Mr. Miller, we're going to begin with you. Reminder, you do have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Okay. I'm Jim Miller. I am just a guy. I did make a run for mayor because I was pretty much fed up and sick and tired of the way things were going around here. I don't really care for politics the way it is in the modern era or even locally. If we want to make a difference, you need to start locally and start there at the kitchen table issues. I got started on this because 4 convicted felon pedophiles moved in next to my house. I live next to a church. Nobody cared or anything else. For further context, my daughter's a survivor of it. Nobody cared about anything going on with my daughter, or that she was now in a very uncomfortable, unsafe situation, not more than a few feet from her door. On top of it too, that the church next to me, that should not be next to a church where small children congregate. It should not be near a school, a park, a daycare, or anything. I don't have all the answers, but I do know right from wrong. I do not have a padded resume. I don't sit on a bunch of committees. I work all day. I'm overworked. I'm overtaxed just like the rest of us. I see what happens. I see how we're left behind. I see how we're forgotten. You saw earlier with Nancy. She didn't even answer or respond to anything when I said you have to be part of a committee or a large group for any of them to even respond. She practically ignored it and had to be reminded it was her turn to speak. This is what happens to those of us that are funding and paying for everything in the city. So I ask you, go to jimmillerforcolorado.com, check it out, see if you like it. I am just a guy, but you need to sit there and think about all this. I know right from wrong. You look at these people up here right now and you start thinking about it. Are you represented? We don't need any more leaders. We have enough of that. We need more representation. You look at these people, you think about it. Would you trust them with your checkbook or your wallet? Would you trust them to make the right decision if you loaned them your car? Make the decision, think for yourself. That's the number one thing to do.
Councilwoman Henja.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. This is a really important election. As you mentioned, Allison, potentially 4, if not even 6 new council members, and are at large have only been on for 2 years. It takes a long time to learn how to do this job. And we have great staff that help us. But I have learned, I feel like I've earned a PhD in the last 4 years. And I am really ready to continue to use it. I think that my reputation has been one now of experience, of listening, of being responsive, of engaging people and bringing people together, and I've gotten a lot done. But the main thing is, because I've done what I said I would do, I'm getting feedback that people trust me. And having trust in elected officials these days is not very common. So I'm very proud of that. And I have helped stop the extension of Constitution by gathering people and listening. I have helped get stormwater and road infrastructure in Rustic Hills, been very responsive to those constituents. And I've worked very hard with the Citadel Mall to help reactivate and create greater safety there, again, by bringing people together. That's what I do. I have received over 200 individual donations, none of them from the development community whatsoever. I'm very proud of that. That speaks to me of how many people believe in me and support in me. So on March 7th, which is just a couple days from now, the ballots will be going out. The last municipal election was only a 27% turnout. We need to do better than that. You get your ballot, there will be 4 names on there. I will be the first one on there. You just need to fill it out, the bubble, and take it to the ballot box, and I'll be happy to serve you again for 4 years. Thank you.
Mr. Moline, you have 2 minutes.
My name's Cass Moline. I'm a disabled veteran, a small business entrepreneur, and more importantly, I'm a father of 5. I've been in Colorado Springs for about 13 years, and in that time, I've come to love Colorado Springs and what it does best. Colorado Springs provides that small town feel in a big city. Excuse me. We have nature in our backyards, yet we have the amenities of a city at our fingertips. And like many of our residents, the military brought me here. And And the military trained me in government contract law, and I did that for about 10 years. And in that time, I saw and came to value the importance of transparency and accountability in how our taxpayers' dollars are spent. When I saw that City Council was open for elections in my district, I thought that this was my opportunity to get involved in a more meaningful and impactful manner. I want my girls to grow up in a city that they love and cherish and find meaning and value in. Not one that they get lost in. I want to continue to protect that small town feel while growing responsibly. And I would be honored to be able to serve as your councilman. Thank you.
Mr. Burns.
Thanks. So I'm Chris Burns at electchrisburns.com. I have lived in this city over 30 years. I was brought to the city, or what brought me to the city was the Olympic Training Center. And from there I fell in love with the city. I served a full career both on the active duty in the Army as well as the Colorado National Guard. Learned immense amounts about service to the country as well as service to the states through disaster preparedness and exercises. Concurrent to that, in 1998, I was accepted the honor to become a Colorado Springs police officer. Over the next 24 years, I've served in every area of the city and in most all the schools as a school resource officer. So those are two areas that I have strong background in, that I am absolutely dedicated to. Since my retirement, I've decided to continue to volunteer my time, and I serve on a city subcommittee for law enforcement advisory in the intent to make it better. We're facing challenges in that area that need to be addressed. I also raised a family here. I have 3 wonderful children, 2 of which are grown and in college now. But they will enter a world where housing prices, particularly here in the Springs, are very high, and it's a very big challenge. And I will seek to do policies and implement things that will increase supply to keep that at a manageable level. If we lock down and don't allow development, we're faced with a Boulder area with houses costing in excess of $1 million. I don't want that to happen. I want families to be able to work and to be able to afford a decent standard of living for their industry. In closing, again, thank you to KOAA for this opportunity. Again, electchrisburns.com, and I appreciate your support.
Okay, and we do have a bonus question, but I'm only going to give you each 30 seconds to answer this one because we're running out of time here. Conversations have come up recently about increasing city council pay. The annual stipend, as you probably looked into it, is just over $6,000. Should the pay be increased, and how should it be funded? You have 30 seconds, Councilwoman Hensham.
Thank you. It is a very challenging job, not just on the City Council side, but also as the Board of Directors for CSU. I have had so many people say we deserve to be paid, and I believe that City Council members should be paid. To balance the strength of a City Council with a strong mayor, we need to grow up as a city and start paying our City Council members to make the difficult decisions, and it will increase representation as well.
Mr. Milley.
Yes, absolutely. I do think that it should be increased. Right now, only the people who are retired or have a financial asset to allow them to serve can serve on City Council. I think that if we allow adequate pay, we'll attract better candidates, and we would have greater representation of our city. And I think that they hold important viewpoints that other people may not have. Thank you.
Mr. Burns.
So I think it's a little ironic to ask members of a political body if they want to get paid more. That seems to be pretty straightforward. My position on that is I would put that to the voters. Do the voters want us to be paid at a level that gives us a living wage? And my contemporaries are correct in that if you do not pay, you're going to be limited on who can run for council and properly serve. With the space to serve in retirement, that would be one way. I would say anything else would be very challenging to be an effective person on council. So with that, I say put that to the voters.
And Mr. Miller.
Yes, I think $400 to $700 a week per work week would be adequate. But to top it off with that, that would open it up for many other people that they could supplement some income and a few other things with it. As well, all these elected officials and everybody we elect in town should not make any more money than the median income of where they live. So that's where you would get the funding for that pretty freaking easily, and it would make a lot more sense. But yeah, it is a little cheesy to be asking the people that are in this position if they want to be paid more. Put it on the ballot and see what they think with actual numbers.
All right, a big thank you to the 4 candidates who joined us here, and a big thank you to all of us joining us online and on the air this afternoon. We'll be on KOAA.com anytime.